Hello everyone, my name is Anshul and today we're going to be doing an electric skateboard build. This is my first real electric skateboard build, and before we start I want to thank a few companies who helped me out with this. The first one is Skate Supply. This is where I got the majority of my core components. So I got the motors from them, which are 58 kV direct drive units. I also got the battery from them, which is a 12S3P 30Q battery, which means I have 50.4 volts to play with, as well as 60 amps of continuous discharge. I also got their ESC, which I'm actually not going to use in this build, and I'll explain why in a second. But it's really good. It was a good price, and it seemed like a really solid unit. I also got from them the tires, or the wheels, but in this case they are more like tires. They're 6-inch airless tires, so they're not pneumatic, but it's pretty cool because they can go off-road, kind of more all-terrain. So the speed controller that I'm using is actually the Foxbox Unity instead of the Skate Supply unit. And the only reason that is because Kurt from Enertion USA, I reached out to him and told him about this project, and he told me that he would send over a Unity, which is very exciting. And as everyone knows, the Unity is probably one of the best controllers out there on the market right now. Sadly, I think there are some issues going on with Enertion, and I'm not really sure where the company's going to go right now. But I wanted to talk about those two companies because they did help me out. So before we actually begin, I kind of wanted to go over what I promised Skate Supply and Kurt from Enertion USA, and kind of what makes this build special. I'm a maker. I've been making things for many years now. And actually a few years ago, I started a nonprofit with some friends and a teacher where we work to expand and spread STEM education in our community. So for the last few years, I've been using technologies like 3D printing, CNC routing, and laser cutting. And so I kind of wanted to incorporate that into this build. So the first thing is my deck. I spent a few hours researching what are my favorite electric skateboards, what are my favorite longboards, kind of what shape makes sense for this build. And I spent another few hours drawing it in a CAD platform. And I'm going to cut that out on a CNC. Why wouldn't I have access to that technology?
Okay, so let's talk about decks. This is the first one that I drew up. These were all drawn in Illustrator. I just kind of looked at cool decks that I liked and kind of copied them and altered them in the way that I would like. There are a few problems with this deck. First of all, I didn't really like the shape, and it also wouldn't fit everything comfortably. It's pretty narrow. Then here's number 2. This was kind of a wacky shape. Also didn't really like this guy. This one I thought was pretty cool, but I don't think it would work well for a more high-performing board like this. I think this would be good for a short board or something. Here are a few more kind of wacky designs that I didn't really end up liking. And then I stumbled upon this, which I really liked. Also drew this in Illustrator. I think this is one of my favorites. I really like the drop-through style. It's plenty wide. But then I was looking at some downhill decks, and I found a shape that I really liked, and so I kind of drew this up, which shares some similarities with that deck. I think it'll work really well for my purposes, and I think it looks really good and is plenty wide for whatever I want to fit on it. So this is what I went ahead and made. So what you're seeing here is us trying to figure out how to fit the board on the CNC. Because our CNC was too small, so we had to do it diagonally and figure out placement and homing and stuff like that. Okay, so this CNC works by a homing system in the left bottom corner. Now the problem is when you're doing something diagonal, you don't really have a left corner. So what I wanted to do was pick the center of the piece as the homing point. Now the problem is this software doesn't allow you to natively do that, so I had to find a workaround. It was actually very simple. First, I set the piece to -45 degrees, which is the angle that we were cutting at, that's diagonal. And then I selected the center of the part, and I just set it to 0, 0. Now this corner right here, which is the homing point, is now in the center of the part. So when it goes ahead and cuts, this will be the homing point, and everything should go smoothly. So right now, what you're watching is the CNC cut the holes. Now the reason I'm doing that is because I have the board clamped onto the surface of the CNC. Once it does the holes, I'm going to drop screws through the holes so that it keeps the board in place, so that once the outline is fully cut, the piece doesn't come free and get caught on the bit.
No longer
The deck cut out completely successfully. It looked really good, but it did require some sanding. I took it to a router table just to clean up the edges, and then I went in with a orbital sander to clean it up. The CNC does cut very clean, but obviously the edges aren't going to be completely smooth, so you do have to go in there and sand it, and it was ready for a coat of stain, which you can see I'm doing right here.
Build on and no one will care.
The deck was looking great after the stain, and I went ahead and threw on a few coats of polyurethane to seal it. I didn't include any footage because that wasn't very interesting. It took like 2 days because there's a lot of drying time, but now I was ready to mount the trucks, and as you can see, the tires are massive, and I'm hoping for some good performance out of these things. Hopefully I can do a little bit of off-road. After the trucks were mounted, I thought it looked pretty cool. I went ahead and laid everything out. There wasn't much to it, just the 12S3P battery and the Foxbox Unity.
Been a long way down. The morning sun fills the void. Now you see there never was a void. Over and over and over again, till you can no longer pretend you are sane. Try but you couldn't.
Now the most disappointing thing about this build is that the enclosure doesn't actually fit on the deck. It looks like the board is slightly too narrow. I definitely thought that I measured this very carefully, but apparently I didn't, and it's okay. I didn't really like the enclosure anyway, so I will have to get a new one. Here's kind of an overview of how the board looks without any electronics or enclosures. Clearly the enclosure I had was not going to fit, so I decided to do something more creative. I was going to 3D print the enclosure. Okay, so here's my design, which I modeled in Onshape, which is a free design program. I printed some of these parts on my CR10 and a few on the Prusa at school. I printed these parts in PETG with a 0.3mm layer height. That's going to give quicker print times, and it's still pretty strong. Rectilinear infill at 100% for maximum strength. Temperature, because it is PETG, 75 degrees on the bed and 235 on the nozzle. Fan isn't necessarily needed, and speeds are just the default within Simplify 3D. So I was ready to slice the part and get printing. Okay, so I got kind of into this whole enclosure making, so I didn't actually film enough, but basically this each piece is held together on the top with a piece of packing tape and on the bottom with a bead of super glue, and then it was wrapped in a carbon fiber wrap because I realized after I kind of assembled the whole thing, it didn't look the greatest, and so I was like, hey, I have this carbon fiber vinyl wrap, let's try wrapping it. And I did, and it makes it look really nice, and as you'll see in a second, it has a really nice contrast with the dark wood. So I just wrapped it, and I basically just cut off kind of the corners with an X-Acto knife, and it looks pretty good. There are a few imperfections, but overall it's really nice. Okay, so the board is done, and it looks great. Now, the reason you see tape is because I used threaded inserts, and inside the glue needs to set, and I just wanted the tape to hold it on while that was drying. Now that everything was done, it was ready for a test ride.